Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but the idea of automation, the idea of automating things within business that humans don't really add value to, is a thing that really brings a smile to my face. I don't know whether this is just me or whether you can kind of, relate to that because it's a really interesting concept, isn't it? If you can automate stuff that is both strategically and tactically, so the day to day as well, important because it makes you more efficient, it just speeds things up, it's doing more of the right stuff, then my view would be what is not to like? And that is what we're going to be covering in this Cambridge Marketing College webinar. We're going to focus on automation meets strategy. I'm Neil Wilkins, one of the tutors at the college. So this is basically the idea of making marketing automation serve your bigger picture, not the other way around. You can, if you choose to right now, get swept along by a lot of the media hype, a lot of talk about AI coming to automate everything in our work and this, that, and the other. It isn't actually that way round. Automation and the tools that serve automation are literally just that. They are tools to help you serve your strategy more effectively. That's the way round it should be. So what we're going to do is we're going to help you to use automation to enhance but not replace strategy. So this isn't something that needs to get in the way of what you're doing. It needs to enhance what you're doing. So we're going to align automation with our objectives. We're hopefully going to streamline some workflows, in other words, the processes that we do in our work on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to free up some time. This is the best bit, if you ask me. Free up some time for the creative and analytical work that truly drives performance. Whether or not you decide to use AI or just stick with the human interface with that kind of stuff, this is going to free you up. If you automate the right things, it's going to free you up to be doing more of the value that you bring to your business. That to me is the key here. And it has to be set in that kind of context. Otherwise, it's just making you busier, doing more stuff. So that's where we're going to begin here. Now, this is a very powerful opportunity for you. Automation is powerful, but it's only powerful when it's guided by a broader strategy. So without purpose, automation will lead to clutter, not clarity. In other words, you'll start to do more potentially of the wrong stuff. You'll start to just be producing more. You'll be scaling things. You'll be, emphasizing stuff that isn't necessarily helping you to move the game forward or grow or whatever your objectives are. So efficiency is doing things right, and effectiveness is doing the right things, according to Peter Drucker. So we need to be effective as well as efficient. And it's this balance that we are going to be focusing on in this conversation. And strategy still has to come first in everything that you think about. If you just kind of consider your day so far, the things that you've been doing, if you've just been doing stuff, just making noise, adding to social media, producing things that don't relate to a higher strategy, then you are just busy. And I never really like using that word because busy implies a little bit kind of running here, there, and everywhere, just looking like you're full and out of control. Whereas coming with strategy first and then automating, using the right tools to deliver the right kind of insights and defining actually how these are then going to help you to do better work, that is what we're talking about here. This is a more efficient way of working. So, a big question that you have to be asking yourself when you're doing all the things that you do, when you're considering some of those things within an automation context, in other words, could I automate that thing that I do regularly where I as a human being do not add much or any value? If the question is, this is going to then help me achieve a measurable marketing goal, then that is the right thing to automate. Just thinking you can automate everything. And of course, some people are fearful, oh, AI is coming for my job. And they're kind of missing the point here that AI can't really automate everything. Well, it can, but if it did, I mean, honestly, it would just be carnage, wouldn't it? So we need to be focusing in on the things that it needs to be doing as an automated process, freeing us up to do the other stuff, the high value stuff. So if automation can help you achieve a measurable marketing goal, in other words, doing more of the high value stuff, then it's worth doing. So that's our starting point. We're not looking here to automate everything. We're looking here to think strategically, in other words, medium to long term, of the value that automating something, a process, a system, an activity, a campaign, whatever it is, that if we can automate that, and because it's the right thing that we need to be doing, then we are doing the right thing. So we've got a step-by-step process that I'm going to talk you through here, and it comes in a number of parts. Now, part one is strategy first. It is quite simple, and I've said this already about 3 or 4 times, so hopefully you're going to get this. So part one is strategy first. This is about thinking of linking automation. So if you want to automate something, so you don't have to necessarily be directly involved, we need to link automation to objectives. So we need to start with some SMART goals. Okay, and then map automation functions directly to the key performance indicators that show how we're progressing towards those goals. So, for example, let's think of if you've got an objective to increase leads, for example, by a certain amount in a certain amount of time, then an automation focus would be, okay, lead capturing and scoring. So in other words, not every lead is of the same value. So therefore, if we need to increase high quality leads, maybe we can automate part of this and actually score them so we can prioritize which ones a human's going to follow up and which one a system or a process could follow up. An example tool of that is HubSpot. You can do that within HubSpot. Another example would be we need to boost engagement rates with our potential prospects and our customers by this amount by this time. So the automation focus could be then personalized content. And of course, we know with AI, we can produce personalized content down to the level of one-to-one engagement. So an example tool of doing that could be Klaviyo, for example. So have a look at those. You can Google these and find a little bit more detail around them. Third example could be we need to improve customer retention by X% before this date. Okay, so it's a measurable key performance indicator that we can put in there, which is the automation focus is we focus on our CRM workflows because there'll be something in our customer relationship management processes where we're seeing drop off, where we're seeing the retention kind of drops away because people just kind of lose interest or people move to somewhere else or they kind of consider a competitor, something like that. So if we are automating elements of our CRM so it becomes super efficient, and Salesforce.com is a really good example of a tool here that you could look at. And by the way, lots of these tools actually have tutorials. So if you want to go deeper into any one of these examples, that would be a good way of doing it. So we've got some objectives here, increasing leads, boosting engagement, improving retention. And then we've got a focus area of automation, the things that we could automate to help us on that journey of achieving our objective. But it's strategy first. It's not saying, let's use HubSpot and see what we can do. It's saying, no, I need to increase my leads by this point in this amount. And so our automation focus is this. So it's coming at it from a strategic perspective rather than from a tools perspective. And that is important. That's really important. We can get sort of, caught up in the hype and caught up in the buzz of, oh, this is a shiny new tool. Let's see what I can do with it. And of course, you do have to explore it. But there are so many thousands of them out there. Unless you start with your strategy first, your key objectives, and then decide what is it we're going to automate, how can you prioritize which tool to use? How do you know which one's going to serve you best? You don't. So it has to be strategy first. That is key. And then what we can use is something that's called the marketing automation pyramid. And you can use this model to ensure that your automation supports, not replaces, the layers that happen above. So if we start with the top of the pyramid, the top of the marketing automation pyramid, this is our strategic layer where we have vision, the higher purpose of the organization. We have our objectives and our KPIs, those things that we've just mentioned. Below that, supporting the strategic layer, we have our system layer. So we have our customer relationship management. We have any integrations of processes. We've got our data, which obviously for most organizations is the lifeblood of the organization. It's the most important thing you've got is the data in your organization. Way more important than products and services because the data is what you trade with. And then below that, we've got a tactical layer. So that's campaign automation potentially. It's scheduling posts, it's producing content, a very tactical layer there, which of course automation can support, but it's only useful if it's supporting the system layer above it and then the strategic layer above that. And then right at the bottom, we've got the operational layer. This is where we're looking at testing, reporting, continuous improvement, and optimizing what we do. So the real kind of nuts and bolts, if you like, the reporting dashboards, those kinds of things. That's the operational layer. And of course, you'd only want to put in the operational layer and the dashboards, the things that are supporting your tactical layer, which is supporting the system layer, which is supporting your strategy at the top layer. So it's a way of thinking about putting strategy first, not paying lip service to it, but saying, okay, we've got a real aim here, a real goal to go for. The systems then that we're going to use and put in place and the processes are these to support that goal. And then we're going to do some tactical stuff within our systems to support the goal. And then we're going to report at an operational level and test and improve our tactics to support the system layer, which is delivering our strategy. So all the time you've got this arrow pointing upwards from operations through tactics, through systems to the strategy. Strategy first. If you don't know what your goals are, you don't have a long-term view of the organization, you don't understand your processes, you can't do any of this. So automation doesn't just jump into play. It's got to be carefully considered. And we're going to build on that in just a moment. So there are common pitfalls here. You can imagine that, can't you? Is the way I've positioned that with that automation pyramid. Automating broken processes. If something's wrong and then you automate it, you're just going to scale the problem. So you need to understand your process mapping. Using tools for volume rather than relevance. And of course, a lot of us can get swept along with the hype and the vanity metrics of just getting bigger numbers. Whoa, look at our monthly report. It looks so much bigger and better. But actually, it's just signaling the fact that you got it wrong in the first place. It's just reporting on stuff that doesn't actually support where you're looking to go as a business. Another one is the set and forget workflows that ignore customer context. And actually, they ignore the fact that a human does need to be part of automation. They're okay, I've said it. You can't just leave an automated process to run by itself, even though the word is automation. You need to have some kind of human interaction there as well. So never set and forget. You are the conductor of this automation orchestra. So you've got to be there, keeping a watch on stuff, just seeing how things are playing out, tweaking things, tuning stuff, seeing when it doesn't work, because it won't all work. I can promise you it won't all work. I've been doing this long enough to know that that's true. And over personalization, leading to fatigue or privacy concerns. And this can happen. You just let an automated process just run some customer contact and it just becomes very unwieldy. It becomes very unattractive on the customer's side. And you don't know because you're not there to watch it, because there's this big automation layer in between. So what we're creating here is a bit of a beast if you don't really play this game properly. You can actually be accelerating problems. You can be scaling issues and challenges. You can be getting it wrong at scale if you don't get this right. So I don't want to put the fear into you here, but it is something to be taken really, really seriously. Automation can be an answer for many teams, many brands, and many businesses, but it's only an answer when you follow the process correctly. So let's move into part two, which is strategy to execution. How can we actually move this thing forward within this automation pyramid? Remember, we've got strategy at the top, we've got systems, we've got tactics, and then we've got the operational stuff. So we need to kind of weave all of these things together. So step one, and I'm sure many of you will have done this, is mapping the customer journey, identifying touch points that your customer has with you, your products, your services, and your brand. Maybe your people as well, because we still need to keep people in the loop here in the customer journey. And identifying the touch points where automation could add value. Because you can automate everything. I said that right at the start, but you probably won't want to, because there'll be certain points in your customer's journey: awareness, consideration, purchase, and loyalty, those multiple steps in the journey that your customer has through the experience of engaging with you. There'll be certain points in that journey where automation actually doesn't really serve very well. I mean, can you imagine a currently where AI is still in quite an immature phase? Can you imagine not having a human interacting with a customer at the sales point of interaction where the customer really wants to be talking to a human? Well, obviously, you wouldn't want to automate that bit. So that is a human interaction point. But there's other points where they complete a form on the website. It doesn't need a customer or, sorry, a customer service person actually going in and then physically sending a data sheet or a brochure. That can be automated. So it's this constant sort of decision point. Is it automation or is it human? Is it something that actually the human doesn't add value to and the customer doesn't really care how it's delivered as long as they get it? That's an automation touch point. Whereas there will be points in the journey where actually it is human first and you would not want to automate. So you've got to think about this very carefully. At the awareness stage, dynamic social ads, for example, could be a good point to automate. At the consideration phase of the customer journey, some personalized emails that come out automatically as a response to a certain customer behavior as they're considering your product or service. At the purchase point, abandoned cart triggers. You don't want to be sat there 24/7 waiting for somebody to, put the products into a basket and then disappear and then try and chase them. You can automate that so that 24/7 this is being watched and monitored, and the customer then can be supported back to their shopping cart to make that purchase. All of these things are points where a human doesn't add value, but automation can be super efficient and really effective. And of course, at the loyalty stage or the retention stage of the customer journey, as I would normally call it, post-purchase surveys doesn't need necessarily. I mean, it depends on your product, depends on the industry that you are in and serving. I mean, it might be a nice thing that a human makes contact and does a survey post-purchase, but that could be something that is automated. We see a lot of review sites, we see things like Trustpilot. All of these things can be automated to follow up a customer after purchase. And that's automation. And sometimes it is a human that's required, but a lot of the time, for most brands, it isn't necessarily that. So considering these touch points where automation adds value is a really important thing. And there'll be many tools that can help you to map your journey, Miro or Lucidchart, for example, if you're not doing that manually. Step two then is choosing your core platforms. I've already mentioned one or two of these in the earlier part of this webinar, but if it's CRM, you can actually choose HubSpot, Salesforce, Pipedrive, many others are available for you to explore and experiment with certain elements of the journey that you'd like to automate. So that customer relationship management is part human, part automation, and using some of the best practice that these guys actually will share with you, because obviously they want to make the best results for you as platforms so that you continue to use them. So they are a very good training ground for all of us. Try them out, test them out, and see what they suggest, and then go and experiment. If it's email and you're thinking about doing automation within email, all of the big players like MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, and Klaviyo give you the opportunity to build schedules, to build automated processes within their platforms. So again, explore and experiment. And if that fits, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. You don't have to say yes to all of this stuff, by the way. Choosing just one or two and experimenting with automation is a better way of doing it rather than just thinking, oh, I've got to automate everything. You don't. So you can actually do this step by step. If you're doing social scheduling, for example, Buffer, Later, Hootsuite, all of these give you that chance. And some of you will probably be very familiar with how you can automate some of these things, because scheduling is something that a lot of us have done now for many, many years. The ones that really, really interest me, in fact, I'm actually quite fascinated by these, are the workflow automation tools, things like Make, Zapier, and Asana. So if you have a little look through those, and again, tutorials are available. They like to help you in your journey of learning and understanding of the possibilities here. Workflow automation is very interesting because that potentially will join up some of the earlier tools that we've talked about. So if you want to get HubSpot talking to MailChimp, talking to Hootsuite, for example, you can within the likes of Make and Zapier. So they will allow these tools to talk to each other. So if you want a longer process map, if you want a longer flow of automation where you kick things off at the start and then you look at the results at the end, but you don't feel you necessarily need to get involved in those interactions, then set up a workflow. So what we're seeing here is this is all about mapping stuff, isn't it? This is all about integrating things before deciding actually to go to scale. It's all about taking little steps, automating little moments, maybe little interactions in the processes that you have. That is the key to doing this. And it is automating the right things. I mean, step three really is all about considering, am I doing the right thing? So there are three questions you can ask if you spot a moment or a touch point in the journey or just a moment in one of your processes on a day-to-day basis and think, I think I might want to automate that because it doesn't feel like I add value. There are three questions you can ask. And these, once you've answered these, are a surefire filter to getting it right first time. First question is it repetitive? So if this is something you're finding has to happen on an ongoing, repetitive basis, there's a good chance that automation may well help. Is it rules based? In other words, is it very predictable? Does it happen in exactly the same way every time? And often things like sending an automated email as a response to filling out a customer contact form on a website, for example, there's nothing non-rules based about that. It is totally rules based. As long as the form is filled in, the customer gets this particular asset as a result of pressing send. That is just a very simple but obvious kind of rules-based process. It never changes. It's always the same. And of course, it is repetitive. So that would then qualify through this filter for automation. And the third question is it measurable? In other words, could we see a direct improvement? Remember, we're always doing this, playing it back to our strategy. So we don't just automate for the sake of it. We automate so that we can see a measurable difference from non-automation. So again, with this contact form on the website, it's very repetitive, it's rules-based because we know it happens in exactly the same way. And is it measurable? And the answer is absolutely yes. If you have a contact form on a website that is, let's call it version A, it's how it's always been, and you get a certain amount of traffic of people completing the form, and you then see that actually not everybody presses send. So we're getting drop off. You make then some changes, you then automate that process and you measure the difference. And you will see an upside, an upturn, because automation is super efficient. So hopefully then that's a very simple little example of using the three questions. Is it repetitive, rules-based, and measurable? And if the example, or the answer rather, is yes, it is, then you've got an option there to automate it. And it really is as simple as that. So, examples would be welcome sequences in the customer journey, report generation generally is about the same thing every time, ad scheduling, often that is a repetitive rules-based process, and content repurposing. You generally do the same things on a repeated basis, don't you, if you stop and think about it. So really knowing your processes is absolutely key. But it doesn't mean that we're replacing everything. I hopefully am making this really, really clear. Step four is keeping a human layer. So you can use AI and automation to support decisions, not make them in isolation. This is really key. You're going to need, even in a long workflow or long process of automation, you're going to need to set review points in every single automated process. Little points where you just want a bit of human interaction just to check things are okay. We've seen this in the real world for time and time again. I mean, the little example, it might be a bit of a strange one here that kind of just jumped into my head, is when you go on a rail trip, so you go on a train. Yes, trains now can be completely and utterly automated. They don't necessarily, they can be driverless as well. So going through ticketing, actually getting onto the train, the way it's timed and scheduled, the actual movement of the train on the tracks, the signaling, etc., can be all automated. But in most countries, in most examples, you still see a train driver, you still see a conductor, you still have somebody coming around through the carriage to serve you. So the human layer, even though you can automate everything, is still really important. So keep customer service, keep storytelling, keep creative work human led. because this still has a real kind of value to the experience. So it is about getting excited by automation, and there is a huge value to it, but it's not about getting overexcited. It's about remembering that this is always going to be a balance. So in those touch points of experience for your customer, because predominantly this is where we're focusing this in today, the automation needs to balance what the customer feels is appropriate to be fast and efficient and automatic with the human-led element. So those little touch points where, yeah, that was good to get a bit of a human interaction. And again, another simple example is this big debate in the high street at the moment in a lot of the supermarkets, this debate as to whether or not to have human cashiers or to go for the self-serve checkout. There is a lot of conversation, a lot of debate, a lot of research going into that question. Some people say, no, automation's great because I can get through faster, don't need to talk to anyone, whereas other people, it is the contact, it's possibly the only contact that they have on a regular basis with another human. So there is a real sensitivity here. Automation is amazing, but we have to keep this human consideration and this human layer in it. So, how do you now then start to build one of these workflows? Building an automation workflow is really, really quite interesting. And you can go and if you look at make.com or Zapier, these are really good tools to give you a big steer as to how you actually workflow automate. But generally, you have three things going on if you want to automate something. You have a trigger, you have a condition, and you have an action. In other words, you have something that triggers off the automation. So it could be, as I said earlier, the form fill. The condition then is that it's filled in by a certain individual. So there's a certain purchase intent, so it appears on a certain place on the website, or it's being filled in by somebody who's completed certain details geographically, or they've answered in a certain way that gives a little bit of information as to the condition of what's then going to happen in that automation. And then it's the action. So it could be an email then is triggered and actually goes out. It could be a task that's signed or a pop-up appears or whatever it happens to be that you decide. So the condition bit is an interesting one because it means that workflows and automation doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to go from A to B to C to D. It could take numerous paths. So A might go to B and C, or B or C before it goes to D. And in fact, it might not go to D at all. It could go to E or it could go to F. Do you see what I'm saying here? That you can build almost a little route map or a road map for each automation. That is workflow. It doesn't have to be step by step by step in a linear fashion on tracks or on rails. It can meander, it can make different choices based on these conditions. So this is where it gets really flexible and interesting. At the same time, in brackets, very complicated. But as long as you're process mapping, in other words, getting those little post-it notes out in your flip charts naturally, or doing it obviously digitally as well. But for lots of us, we want to see a little post-it note because we can move that around and we can start to play with the various conditions that might enable us to do different actions to different people who trigger the automation. Again, this form filling on a website is just a nice, simple example, which hopefully is going to resonate with you. Practical workflow example with the objective of lead nurturing. So this could be part of a lead nurturing process is that the trigger is that the customer or prospect downloads a guide. That's the trigger. The workflow adds to the CRM. That's the action because we now know who actually downloaded that guide. And then the condition is that it sends a follow-up email in 24 hours. And then the action is it assigns a sales rep if it's opened twice. So you're putting conditions, actions, and triggers into this workflow. So it becomes really, really practical. It's a thing that actually happens in the real world. This is automation. And again, HubSpot, Zapier, they all enable you to do this. You can build up these workflows step by step. Remember, you're considering trigger, condition, and action. This is what we're trying to do here is we're building up. So if this happens, I want it to do this. If this happens, I don't want it to do that. I want it to do this. And so you're building up step by step the conditions, the triggers, and the actions. It's those three little elements in a workflow automation that you need to think about. And we can start to do this internally as well. I mean, we can see a lot of internal efficiency when we're automating. Campaign reporting dashboards, for example, those can be refreshed. Slack notifications for CRM updates, for example, can give you, little triggers based on things that have happened in updates to the CRM, can actually then trigger actions for people, humans, to actually do follow-ups in Slack. I mean, a little card could get automatically produced that assigns a particular process point or a particular contact that's required for a customer as a result of them downloading a data sheet or a brochure. So then a human then follows up that particular individual. This is again workflow automation, blending the automatic bit with a bit of human interaction. And a nice one at the bottom there is the social content approval workflow. This is where you can use something like maybe Zapier to basically do sort of an editing, a human editing process within, maybe if you're creating AI agents to produce your content, your social content, maybe repurposing for different platforms, different social networks. And then there is an approval workflow that actually involves you. And actually, it serves you with a little notification that says, hey, we've just produced some content. Would you like to come in and would you like to audit it? Or would you like to edit it or approve it? So you're including yourself in the workflow. Do you see again what is happening here? The automation is not necessarily distinct from human. It's very, very bundled together. And as part of that, we can start to think about content planning automation. We could, for example, create a template that tags each content piece to campaign goals and audience segments. We can automate content calendars, reminders, and repurposing. There are a lot of tools that help you do this. And so if you're constantly doing a manual scheduling and manual planning, and you feel actually, because this is repeatable, because it's measurable, because we've got particular actions that happen on a regular basis, yeah, actually, maybe there is an opportunity here to bring some kind of automation in, which then frees me up to think more strategically about what kind of content would we want to serve? It's that creative bit again. So you then start to add a more strategic thinking layer over and above the processing layer, which is what this would be. Email as well is another really good one in this part, because as we start to kind of automate some of our routes to market, email can be very, very specific in terms of providing some amazing automation opportunities. MailChimp, Klaviyo, Sendinblue, lots of these platforms, a lot of the most popular ones are now really, really focusing in on automation because they know it can enhance what we do. So you could build welcome series. So as people join and accept the request for receiving newsletters or updates or bulletins from you, there can be a series of automated welcomes that go out to nurture that new connection. Abandoned cart recovery. So again, we said this one a little bit earlier, where you can actually serve people with follow-up emails. If they didn't then come back from that initial prompt, maybe you follow up and ask how they're doing. Did they make a purchase elsewhere? All of these kinds of follow-up things can help to nurture that relationship all the way through to loyalty reminders. What a nice one is that, a certain scheduled point after a purchase, you get some kind of connection, not a sales message, definitely not a sales message, although you could argue sometimes there might be a follow-up warranty or extra service or trade up or on sell that might be relevant. But for most of us, it's about building the relationship. And you can test regularly for the tone, the accuracy, the engagement that you see from these things. This could be a game changer. If you're looking to grow as an organization, if you're looking to get more value from each customer, this kind of automation can really, really work. So I would certainly suggest that you think about that and choose it. With social media scheduling and AI support, a lot of us are now using AI for caption generation and performance prediction before we send out our stuff. You can, schedule posts in themes that educate, themes that inspire, themes that sell, and you can review these on a regular basis. Buffer, Flick, Hootsuite, Akoya, a lot of these tools now are starting to introduce this idea of more context relevant scheduling and automation. So that could be, again, another one that you could think of, maybe if that is relevant to you. If you're doing paid ads, you can automate paid ads as well, or you can automate budget allocation based around the A/B testing that you're doing. If version B is performing better than version A, you can automate the skewing of budget into option B because it just performs better than option A on an automatic basis. Obviously, with something like that, you're going to need some regular manual oversight. You don't want to just leave this to the automation. You want to be reviewing regularly to prevent any kind of spend drift because it might be that it worked the first time, but then the second time it did it kind of lost its way and you wasted some money over there. But it could also be things like creative rotation. You get AI to work in line with some of these paid ad automation tools and not only just work from past data, but actually forecast and predict what creative might perform best because of time of day, day of week, season, whatever it happens to be. You can use AI to get super creative here if you want to take this on to the next level. That is certainly a very interesting one once you've kind of mastered some of the other areas in here too. And then once you've kind of made those choices, you've gone through the filter, you've used the automation pyramid to make sure you're still serving those higher level priorities that you have as a business. And then you've decided, okay, we're going to start these three little processes here. We're going to have a play. We've got some tools. We're going to join them together. We're going to do some automation. We're going to keep a close watch on it. But actually, we've got something to play with now, and we'll see the difference that it can make. What I would strongly encourage you to do as well is to keep a very, very close eye on this. This section we're going to call maintenance, insight, and improvement, because ultimately, you do need some kind of checklist of what happened, why it happened. So you're going to need to review this stuff and also what you're going to do differently next time. Making sure and staying compliant with, if you're in a regulated industry, you'll need to do this anyway. But it's good practice for all of us, even if we're unregulated. Keeping documented workflows, making sure that we're compliant with GDPR and that we get the consent. We don't just fall into the automation loop and think, oh, well, now anything goes. We make sure that all the due diligence, all the right way of doing responsible business still applies. And just because you are doing automation does not mean you can't be or shouldn't be responsible. You can look at the ICO's guidance on this one. It's a really, really good report. There's a governance checklist for responsible automation. It's worth doing this if you start to do this at scale, because very quickly you can kind of almost forget what you've automated and it just becomes part of the organization. It can get lost. So documenting everything as you go is key. Even when you start really small, it's worth doing because then you can see the journey that you've come on to prove the value to yourself and to others. And as you do that, what you're very likely to want to do is to set up some loops, some testing and optimization loops, where you can actually test the before and after. So you can test, you can measure, and you can refine. These are really, really good principles, just good business anyway, but we're certainly going to see these because, of course, if you remember our little checklist, everything in automation can be and should be and must be measurable. So if it is, you can take this down to the level of subject lines, call to action copy, the length of the form, really, really granular level detail. And you can actually measure and make incremental improvements. So this is about automating data collection, but not the decision making. This is all about saying, okay, I'll gather the outputs, I'll gather what happened, and then I'm going to start to really, really forensically look into why do we think that happened? Why do we think that improvement came about? So not just firefighting the stuff that doesn't work, but actually celebrating and embracing the things that do work and understanding why. I always use this phrase, turning information into intelligence. And of course, now we've got AI to help us to do that at scale. So I would regularly suggest that you're doing this, constantly revisiting, constantly looking to optimize and continuously improve. And it is about turning the data into insights. There are a lot of dashboards that enable you to really report back to the organization the improvements with your automation. And of course, if you're going to need to do this at scale, and potentially if you're a much larger organization, there probably will be workflow budgets that you're going to need because of the scale of your organization. So having a dashboard that gives you the evidence to back up your requests is absolutely key. And there are now dashboards like Looker Studio and Supermetrics, for example, funnel.io, that enable you to do that. And you can also then put a layer of AI-driven analysis on the top. You're going to need to experiment with these. This isn't something I've actively done myself yet, but I certainly will be intending to do that. It's a layer on the top of that where we're actually seeing the dashboard, and then we're working with that dashboard to go deep with the AI into, okay, but what does this really mean? What actually really happened? Because, of course, we can do much deeper analysis with AI. So, the step by step process, if you want to be creating these dashboards, is to identify those key metrics that are meaningful not just to you, but to the business as a whole. Remember our automation pyramid from earlier, the ones that will then be the ones that are supporting the strategy. Compare them to some benchmarks. What did you have before you started automating? What was the performance like? You need to know that, so set that at the outset. Generate AI summary reports. Of course, you'll want to edit these because you've got the nuance and the understanding of what's going on in the business, but that's also important. And then present recommendations for improvements. You can get your AI to help you with that as well, because a lot of the time it will help you to prioritize, because you're probably going to see half a dozen, if not 10, 12 different improvements you could do. But if you ask your AI to help you, almost kind of narrow that down to maybe the top three, and those top three are the top three because they're going to impact most positively on your strategy, then those would be the priority ones that you'd want to work with. So that's important. So what we're trying to do here is go through this continuous improvement loop. What worked, remove redundant automations, add new triggers and refine rules, and then train anybody right on a regular basis to understand if they're not directly involved within the organization or within your team, for example, actually how you're doing it and what you're doing. So evaluate, eliminate, enhance, and educate. Those four E's are really, really good little checklist because automation is never set and forget. It's going to evolve just by its nature, and you're going to want it to evolve too. So if you've got others involved in this kind of process and you want to kind of get everybody's buy-in, keep them brief, keep them seeing the dashboards. Maybe you have those on an intranet or something that's very easily accessible, some kind of shared drive or something, so that everybody knows the improvements, why they're happening, how they're happening, what you've removed, what you've now added in, what worked, and what you're going to do more of. Because if everybody's bought into this, this becomes a frictionless process. This becomes process mapping and engagement across the organization. This could be a new habit that you can then stack against all the other good habits that you have as an organization. This could be really, really powerful. And other parts of the organization may well also feel, well, actually, we could do the same in our area. Marketing are doing a really good job there. I wonder what we could automate. Could we follow the same process? The answer is probably yes. And so you're going to see things joining up very, very nicely. And for us, in our balanced automation model, a little bit like the balanced scorecard, what we're going to try and do at part 6 of our process here is to bring it all together, is to keep a balance. Automation should amplify the things that we can do creatively. It doesn't actually replace it. So what we're looking to do here is to see the strategic value and the amount of output that we need to be doing as well as part of this automation. So with CRM workflows, for example, we've mentioned those a few times, very high strategic value because their engagement, management of the customer relationships are really, really important. Human oversight with that one, yeah, absolutely. You can't leave your CRM to run itself, so that's required regularly. Social scheduling, well, strategic value, probably medium, I would say. So the human oversight, probably weekly. Just keep an eye on it. That's important. Predictive analytics, that's where you're using AI to make these more strategic improvements to the process maps and the automations you're doing. Strategically, very, very high value because that is prioritizing the whole business. So human oversight, yeah, probably quarterly reviews, I would suggest. That's really key. And then a more tactical one, copy generation. Lots of us do that. We're all of us in some way content creators. So strategic value, well, it's medium, isn't it? It's not absolutely high strategically. It's a more practical, tactical thing. So the human oversight, well, I would say always. So even if you are doing automation for creating content and copy, I'd say do it collaboratively. Co-create it with your automation tools because then you've always got your finger on the pulse, and that's going to be key. So your next steps, how are you going to now sort of bring this all together and take this forward? Well, I would say audit current automation tools. So if you're using anything that we've been talking about within the work that you're doing, and it's got an automation kind of element to it, maybe you have to trade up to the next level of your subscription. I don't know what you've got, but that's possible. Just audit what you've got right now. Identify some processes to streamline. So those are the workflows, the simple things, those repetitive things. Remember our little three-step checklist, and align with the business objectives. Focus on the things where you're going to see the biggest, most significant impact. Build governance and reporting. In other words, keep a log of everything that you're changing, and train your team because it's unlikely you're going to be doing this alone. So make sure you don't do this in isolation in a bubble, but you talk to people about what you're attempting, how you're doing it, and hopefully they'll come on board too. So your quick win checklist is link every automation to a key performance indicator. So you've got a justification as to why you're improving this particular thing through automation. Document your workflows. That's obviously vital. I've said that a few times. Schedule weekly checks. You've got your workflows documented, so just work your way through them and just double check everything's okay. Remember, you're in charge of this thing. It doesn't have its own life without you. Keep human review points. Just double check those are still relevant because it might be, as you're looking at your results on your dashboard, that certain things need more human interaction and certain things need less. So you will adapt and change over time. And share the learnings. I say this again with your cross-functional teams. So with any colleagues outside of the organization's marketing team, if that's where you reside and where you sit, share with finance, share with HR, definitely share with sales if you've got a sales team. Explain to them why you're doing what you're doing and see if you can then work together cross-functionally to make this even better. And as a final reflection, just a little reminder, really, that automation should serve your strategy, not steer it. Hopefully, I've got you to a point now where you're thinking of it almost as this kind of sort of sandwich layer between the strategy that sits above you, the tactical day-to-day moments that sit below you, and this automation bit that sits in between. Because used wisely, it is going to take away the drudgery, the admin, the stuff where you don't add value. And it's going to give you time to think, to create, and to innovate. And Forrester's Future of Marketing Operations report 2024 said, and this is a really, really good quote that really kind of sums everything up as to why automation should meet strategy, is that automation doesn't replace people. It empowers them to focus on what humans do best.